Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Joe Davis from Southern New Hampshire University. Justice 103, the corrections class. Today we're going to talk about Week 2, Module 2's discussion question 2-1. Okay, as I've recommended to you before, when you come to discussion questions, essay questions, anything else, break it down so that you understand what the question's really asking. Okay, so the prompt says, why are there so many mentally ill offenders in jail? And what steps can a jail take to ensure the safety of mentally ill inmates? Now we're talking about jails here and not prisons. That's a big differentiation. These are off the street bookings, short term, at least in theory, incarceration, probably no more than a year, although people do get to spend much more time than that. So what's this question really asking? It's saying, why are there so many mentally ill mentally ill people in jail? Well, it implies in that question that there are too many, but it also implies that it is the wrong place. And that's what the way you need to practice reading questions, because you could get sidetracked and be talking about the numbers rather than where they are. The numbers are important, they're a supporting point, but the key is, do mentally ill people belong in a jail? That's the question that's being asked here. Now, with that said, there are not a lot of other options available. The steps that a jail can take to ensure the safety. Okay, so the issue isn't the number of mentally ill, it's what can a jail do, because that's where we are today. The question's not asking where should we be, what would be a better opportunity. Okay? Now, we want to make sure we understand the rubric so that we meet all of the critical elements in that rubric to get as high up as grade as possible. So when we look at comprehension, that says develops an initial post with an organized, clear point of view or idea using rich and significant details. Make sure you read that, understand it, and are thinking about it. Timeliness, you have to submit the post on time to get the maximum points. That's Thursday at 11:59 p.m. And if you're 2 days late, you get no points for that. So you give up 5 points. Engagement. Now this is your reply to others in the discussion board. Provides relevant and meaningful response posts with clarifying explanation and detail. Okay, so it has to be relevant and meaningful. You have to respond to what the other students said, and it has to have some meaning to it. You're answering them as if, as I've mentioned before, we're sitting in a classroom. Okay, and then it clarifies and it provides additional detail. So a simple question, or excuse me, a simple sentence that says, Joe, I agreed with your post. You really made some key points. What do you think about mentally ill people in jail? Where else could we put them? That's nothing. I mean, that doesn't get you winning points. Final item up is writing. The mechanics of it. Writes posts that are easily understood, clear, concise, using proper citation methods where applicable with no errors in citations. So that implies you need to have some citations, research in your answer. Alright, so let's now look at the actual substantive content of what we're going to write about. Now we know what the question is, we know what the rules are, if you will, the critical elements. So let's take a look at the substantive content. Okay, the first is that in a jail system, new bookings off the street, it's intake screening, and that's where the potential for suicide is detected, and it's also where medical staff can detect mental illness. Actually, and our county, not to blow Orange County's horn, was one of the first that emphasized that deputies were all trained to recognize suicides, or suicide potential inmates. Okay, so you're going to do initial screening looking for tendencies towards suicide. Their life is in. They've been arrested for drunk driving, and they think their world is ended. Or maybe they were doing a lewd and lascivious act somewhere in a bathroom or something. Their world is ended. They're embarrassed, they're shamed, and that's what you see as the potential for self-destructive behavior. Okay, the next up is the screening instrument. There are a lot of these, but the bottom line, you're talking about a psychologist instrument, a test, if you will. They're usually fairly short, but they rely on an offender's honesty, and it asks about the history of mental illness, taking psychotropic medications, thoughts of killing yourself, doing yourself harm, those kinds of things. But of course, this is a screening process, and there's not a lot of interaction and time, and if the inmate lies, the inmate lies. The next thing that you might want to think about in substantive content would be, do jails have intensive mental health programs? And remember, there are only somewhere between 40 and 50 jails in this country that have 1,000 inmates. Those are considered large jails. That means there are thousands of jails that have far less than that in population. Okay, so this intensive mental health program goes beyond screening. So okay, you screen the inmate and you realize that they have self-destructive tendencies, they've been on psychotropic drugs, they hear voices, those kinds of psychological maladies that need to be addressed. Is there a program in the jail to handle it? 78% of the jails in this country, according to the text, do screen, but very few have this mental health program. So then what happens? Where do you send them? To the emergency room? A county as large as Orange County, 3.3 million people, just now seeking a grant for 2 more local psychiatric emergency care treatment facilities. There's only one in the county. It only has 10 beds. Now, the county jail system does have a very extensive program. I offer you these things because you're supposed to be thinking about this stuff, okay? And then what about suicide prevention and suicide watch programs? Well, in the text, this is a big topic. I worked for an assistant sheriff that his doctorate was doctoral dissertation was about suicide prevention in county jail systems. So there are about 8 basic things that you can do. There's training of staff and mental health staff. That's what I had mentioned already. The screening that we've talked about. Communication, and that's where the arresting transporting officer and the jail staff have to talk. What did the inmates say or do? They may be drunk, they may be under the influence, they may be babbling. You got to listen. That's what we get paid to do. The housing, where can there be a suicide-resistant housing? I was the federal court liaison when the federal judge took the rubber room, the restraint cells, the safety cells away. The psychiatric staff, it wasn't security staff, we put people in there with no clothes. And the walls, ceiling, and floor are all padded. And the federal judge decided that that was a violation of their dignity. He would rather have them leave with a bruised head, that's the word he used in the courtroom, than to leave with bruised dignity. And so they had to have a gown. But anyway, levels of observation, it has to be more, and the toughest thing seems like for jail staff to do around this country is to make regular checks of inmates every 10 minutes. That means, yeah, every 10 minutes you get up off your butt, you walk over, you look in there, you talk to them through the door, maybe you open the door, and then you make your log entry. Intervention in a suicide attempt. That attempt can be the obvious, where they try to hang themselves or do some other harm to themselves, cut themselves, but it can also be just short of that. The planning, you see, they're braiding their underwear into a rope, those kinds of things. And then finally, reporting, you have to include in the report everyone involved. What it is what it is. And then finally, the morbidity and mortality review process, you have to go back and see what happened. And if there are policies and procedures that need to be revised, they need to be revised. If staff needs to be retrained, they need to be retrained. If staff needs to be disciplined or terminated, then that's what has to happen. That's just the way it works. I hope that helps you a little bit. Our music intro, as you can see, gets a credit. If I can answer any questions for you, help you out in any way, please let me know. Keep those cards and letters coming.